This is the story of Duval County's youngest ever murder suspect, 12-year-old Cristian Fernandez. On March 14, 2011, 2-year-old David Galarraga was left at home under the supervision and care of his older half-brother, Cristian Fernandez, despite the fact that Cristian had already broken David's leg while wrestling with him months beforehand. At some point while his mother was gone, Cristian became physically abusive with his brother and shoved him very roughly into a bookshelf 2 times. Later, when his mother returned, Cristian, who was worried about his brother, immediately took her to see David, who was unconscious by that time. Their mother, Bianella Susana, chose simply to change the baby's clothes, wipe the blood off his face, and put ice on his head. Though David was unconscious and unresponsive, she did not call 911 or rush him to the hospital. Bianella later said that she was hoping it was just a concussion and that he would wake up. She waited over 4 hours before finally taking him to the hospital. David fought for his life there for 2 days before he finally succumbed to his injuries and passed away. Those 4 hours could have been what cost David his life, as doctors told Bianella that if she had sought medical help immediately, he might have survived. During those crucial 4 hours, Bianella spent most of that time on the internet. She did some online banking, watched some music videos on YouTube, read news stories online about Pippa Middleton, as well as David and Victoria Beckham, and checked her email. She did some other searches periodically while on the computer, including the phrase, "when someone gets knocked out." She also visited the Wikipedia page for coma and visited a website about concussions multiple times, none of which seemed to have scared her or propelled her into action. She finally did her last web search for the address of the hospital to which she would drive her son and where he would eventually die. For her part in her son's death, Bianella Susana was arrested on April 1, 2011. And charged with aggravated manslaughter of a child under 18 years by culpable negligence. This is due not only to the fact that Bianella did not seek medical treatment for her son immediately, but also because she was fully aware that Cristian was previously responsible for breaking David's leg. Still, she chose to leave David alone with him. Cristian Fernandez was initially arrested for aggravated child abuse on March 14, 2011. But after David's death, on June 3 of 2011, he was indicted for first-degree murder. During Cristian's police interrogation, he said that David was carrying books over his head when the books fell. Then David fell. The detective told Cristian repeatedly that couldn't be the truth, which led Cristian to confess. He said he was mad because he remembered something his stepdad did to him and that he took it out on his brother. Cristian, using a doll, showed the detective how he shoved David into the bookcase. He said the boy was bleeding from the nose and mouth, so he carried him to the bed. He went on to say he was worried about what was going to happen to David, that he wasn't worried about himself. Cristian asked if his brother didn't wake up. Would that mean he won't make it? He asked if the doctors could wake him up. The detective said they couldn't do that, and she didn't know what was going to happen. Despite this confession from Cristian, Judge Mallory Cooper dismissed the videotaped interview and confession as evidence because police were wrong to interrogate him without another adult present, and that his consent as a 12-year-old was not legally sufficient. But what caused a 12-year-old to become so violent? When looking at Cristian's upbringing, it is not hard to see where things went wrong. The story starts when Cristian was conceived from a relationship between his 12-year-old mother, Bianella Susana, and his 20-year-old father, Jose Antonio Fernandez. Jose was criminally charged because of the relationship but avoided incarceration after vowing to raise the boy. He was instead given 10 years probation and is now a registered sex offender. It wasn't long before he broke his vow and completely disappeared from Cristian's life. When Cristian was just 2 and his mother 14, they were both removed from the custody of Bianella's mother and put into foster care after authorities found a dirty and naked Cristian walking around by himself outside a Florida motel. Things went from bad to worse for Cristian after that. When Cristian was 7 years old, his mother began dating and eventually married Luis Galarraga Blanco. By that time, Bianella, then 23, already had 3 more children by Luis. As multiple people around the family have testified, Luis had a very bad temper and was physically abusive towards Cristian and his siblings. On October 22, 2010, a then 11-year-old Cristian showed up at school with a swollen eye. When Cristian was questioned by officers about his eye, he told them that his stepfather had punched him in the face that morning. He was taken to the hospital to be assessed for retinal damage. While Cristian was at the hospital, his mother and the Department of Children's Services were called to the school, where a discussion took place. After Luis refused to come in for questioning, the police went to his apartment to arrest him, but he would not answer his cell phone or door. When the police finally arrived, they were not prepared for the door to be opened by a frightened little girl who immediately ran back into the rear bedroom, trailing bloody footprints behind her. Nor were they prepared for the gruesome discovery that would follow. Luis Galarraga Blanco was discovered dead from a self-inflicted gunshot wound to his head. He had committed suicide in front of his children, including Cristian and David, who were found covered in blood. Luis is believed to have killed himself not only to avoid prosecution for physically abusing Cristian, but also because he is alleged to have been sexually abusing him as well. Doctors who examined Cristian stated that he showed signs of long-term sexual abuse. Despite all of the trauma Cristian went through, the court still decided to charge him as an adult for first-degree murder. However, Cristian took a plea deal and pleaded guilty to manslaughter and aggravated battery. Cristian was put under strict conditions as part of the plea and was released on his 19th birthday in January 2018. He was released after serving 7 years in prison. Upon his release, he is serving 8 years of probation and has strict conditions. That includes conditions to stay away from any siblings unless they seek to meet with him and not to spend any unsupervised time with anyone under 16 unless approved by his probation officer. He also must look for employment when eligible. Bianella pleaded guilty to manslaughter. A judge spared her jail time and placed her on probation for 10 years. She admitted in court that Cristian had a horrible life and that she should have been a better mother.